The Great Migration was one of the most consequential social and cultural upheavals in the United States, deeply transforming the lives of Black Americans and the nation's social, economic, and political landscape. Spanning from approximately 1916 to 1970, it was a period marked by the migration of over 6 million African Americans from the rural South to the urban North. This journey not only reshaped the demographics of the United States, but also redefined the cultural identity, labor dynamics, and civil rights landscape of the country. Rooted in the pursuit of freedom, better economic opportunities, and relief from the oppressive racial discrimination of the South, the migration was a powerful testament to resilience and the unyielding desire for dignity, autonomy, and respect. It was also a response to the stark racial violence and structural barriers that defined life for Black Americans in the South, driving them to seek a different future in cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York. The roots of the Great Migration extend deep into the post-Civil War era, as the Reconstruction period ended and the South saw the implementation of Jim Crow laws. These laws legally enforced racial segregation, stripping African Americans of many civil rights gained after the abolition of slavery. In the South, white supremacist policies and practices were reinforced by both state governments and everyday community interactions, creating a society where Black people faced constant marginalization. Black codes and laws restricted nearly every aspect of their lives, including voting rights, employment opportunities, education, and access to public spaces. These codes were supported by violence, including lynchings, mob attacks, and organized groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Economic disenfranchisement was also entrenched in systems like sharecropping, which kept many Black families in cycles of debt and poverty, severely limiting their socioeconomic mobility. The plantation economy in the South thrived on cheap Black labor, and the power structures of Southern society were built around maintaining the racial hierarchy that kept African Americans in a subordinate position. The first wave of the Great Migration began around 1916 and was sparked by multiple factors, most notably World War I. The war created an economic boom in the North, especially in industries such as steel, automotive, and manufacturing, which saw labor shortages due to the draft. As northern industries expanded, labor recruiters traveled to the South, offering African Americans higher wages and more stable jobs than what they could find in their home communities. This created a push and pull effect, where opportunities in the North attracted African Americans away from the oppressive conditions in the South. For the first time, many African Americans saw a tangible path to independence and economic progress outside the agricultural South. The allure of a new life in the North brought not only young men seeking work, but also entire families, determined to build a future free from the rigid social constraints of Jim Crow. The journey to the North was fraught with challenges, both emotional and practical. Many African American families were leaving behind generations of history, culture, and connections, and the journey was often complicated by financial limitations. The travel was by train, bus, or even by foot, through networks that were poorly managed and often discriminatory. Train companies often segregated Black passengers, and northern cities had specific areas where African Americans were allowed to settle. The railways were a central part of this journey, connecting southern towns and cities with northern industrial hubs. For the migrants, arriving in the North did not mean an immediate end to hardship. Black Americans faced severe housing discrimination and were often relegated to the poorest, most segregated neighborhoods. As more African Americans moved into northern cities, overcrowded, segregated neighborhoods such as Harlem in New York, the South Side of Chicago, and Paradise Valley in Detroit emerged. These urban enclaves became symbols of both resilience and struggle, embodying the complex dynamics of Black life in the North. The labor markets in the North provided African Americans with opportunities that were previously unimaginable, but the work was often low-paying and dangerous. African Americans found employment in steel mills, meatpacking plants, and automobile factories, jobs that white workers often refused. However, they faced discrimination within these industries, often being given the hardest and least desirable tasks. This discrimination was not limited to job allocation, but also included wage disparities, union exclusion, and lack of upward mobility. Racial tensions flared as Black workers were used as strikebreakers, leading to conflict with white workers and fueling resentment. Yet, despite these challenges, the economic opportunities allowed many African Americans to build stable lives, own homes, and provide better education for their children. The North represented a relative improvement, allowing for a degree of personal freedom and self-determination that was severely lacking in the South. The cultural impact of the Great Migration was profound and can be seen in the arts, music, literature, and social movements that flourished in northern cities. The influx of Black people into urban centers created a vibrant cultural explosion, especially in neighborhoods like Harlem, which became the birthplace of the Harlem Renaissance. This was a period of extraordinary cultural productivity, with African American writers, musicians, and artists gaining national recognition. Figures such as Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Duke Ellington emerged, using their art to explore themes of racial identity, heritage, and the Black experience in America. Jazz and blues music, which originated in the South, found new audiences in the North and became integral parts of American culture, influencing a wide range of musical genres and laying the foundation for future civil rights advocacy through expressive art. Religion also played a critical role in the lives of Black migrants. Churches were among the first institutions established by Black communities in northern cities, serving not only as places of worship but as centers for social life, political activism, and mutual support. African American ministers and church leaders often became influential voices advocating for civil rights and equality. The Black church provided a sense of community and continuity for migrants, helping them maintain cultural traditions and values. Additionally, the church became a hub for organizing civil rights efforts, laying the groundwork for the activism of the 1950s and 1960s. The Great Migration also had political ramifications that reshaped American society. As African Americans moved north, they gained the right to vote, which had been systematically denied to them in the South. This newfound political power was a transformative development, as Black communities in cities like Chicago and New York began to influence local and national politics. African Americans elected representatives, organized for workers' rights, and challenged discriminatory policies. The Black vote became a crucial factor in local elections and later in national politics, as Northern politicians realized the importance of the African American electorate. The migration thus contributed to a shift in political power, with African Americans playing an increasingly active role in shaping policies and advocating for civil rights. This period also saw the rise of influential civil rights organizations such as the NAACP, which worked to combat segregation, promote equality, and dismantle racial barriers. The challenges faced by African Americans in the North should not be understated. Racism was not confined to the South, and many white Northerners opposed the influx of Black migrants into their communities. The arrival of African Americans in northern cities often led to white backlash, including housing discrimination, economic marginalization, and even race riots. The Red Summer of 1919 was a series of race riots that broke out in cities across the United States, with Chicago seeing some of the worst violence. These riots exposed the persistent racial tensions and highlighted the reality that racism was a national issue, not just a Southern one. The violence was a stark reminder that while the North offered economic opportunities, it was not free from racial prejudice and inequality. Despite these hardships, the Great Migration instilled a sense of resilience and determination within African American communities. The migrants and their descendants were able to build vibrant, culturally rich communities that contributed to the economic and cultural landscape of the United States. By the time the second wave of the Great Migration began after World War II, African American communities in the North had grown considerably. This second wave, from the 1940s to the 1970s, saw even larger numbers of Black Southerners relocating to northern, western, and midwestern cities. This migration was driven not only by economic factors, but also by the continued prevalence of racial violence and segregation in the South. The civil rights movement gained momentum during this time, with northern cities serving as key sites for activism and mobilization. The migration fundamentally altered the racial makeup of the North and had lasting implications for race relations, economic policies, and cultural expression in the United States. The legacy of the Great Migration can be seen in the diverse cultural and political fabric of modern American society. African Americans redefined what it meant to be Black in America, creating a new cultural identity that blended Southern roots with urban experiences. This migration laid the foundation for the civil rights movement, as Black Americans in the North, empowered by their numbers and political influence, demanded justice and equality on a national scale. The migration also had lasting economic effects, as Black communities in the North became integral parts of the urban workforce, contributing to the growth of Northern industries and transforming American cities into culturally rich, economically diverse environments. In many ways, the Great Migration was a journey towards self-realization and empowerment. It was a movement characterized by hope, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit in the face of adversity. African Americans were no longer passive recipients of their circumstances, but active agents in their pursuit of a better life. The migration allowed them to carve out spaces of independence and expression that had been denied to them in the South. While challenges and discrimination persisted in the North, the migration represented a significant step toward the realization of Black agency and autonomy within American society.